Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so happy to have you with us for today's conversation. This will be an interactive event, so if you're able to, we would love to see you on camera. And then if you don't already have your first name as your Zoom name, please go ahead and change that so that we know who we're talking to later on in the call. And before we get started, just a couple of small giants announcements for you with some upcoming events. First, we have our annual summit coming up April 29th to May 1st in Detroit. We will have many conversations like the one that we are about to have today with some more storytelling, framework sharing, all of that fun stuff, and we'd love for you to join us. Heidi is going to pop the link with more information in the chat. And then we also have another virtual event coming up next month called Community Connections, and that will be a little bit different. That is a small group problem solving event. So I'll send you into breakouts. You'll bring a top of mind leadership or business challenge, and you will receive support. And you'll also be able to support others as well. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce Katrina Noelle, who is the president of No Research, which is a full service qualitative insights consultancy that helps marketers and brands understand customer motivations through custom research design. Katrina relishes in the opportunity to empower and support the talented women on her team, who all happen to take part in the team retreat that they have, and she's about to share lots more with us about. And with that, Katrina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I love that. The way you said relished, it just like made me even more excited about the presentation together today. Thank you so much, Bridget. Thank you everybody for coming. As mentioned, this is interactive, so I have a shorter talking time than a usual webinar type situation because we want to make sure that we open the floor and get ideas from everybody about team connections and opportunities to meet as groups in this crazy, mostly hybrid world that we're all in these days. So I do have some slides. They're intentionally minimal, but it's mostly to remember what I need to say. So we're going to go through this and then leave plenty of time for conversation. I do also have the chat open and available. So if there's something that you want to ask in the moment, before I go on, please pepper that in. Happy to keep an eye on that as well so that you don't miss the key moment of being able to talk about the topic. All right, so we call our team, there's lots of names for this, right? Retreats, gatherings, meetings, etc. We tend to use the word offsite because we do go somewhere new and different for our team retreat. Just to give you a little background on myself and the team, there are currently 9 of us. We are a distributed team and always have been across the US, all different time zones and different areas. We pre-pandemic used to be together quite a lot because in the field of qualitative research, we did a lot of in-person research and on sites with our clients. And so we saw each other quite a lot. So we didn't necessarily change the way people worked, but because most of our research has now gone online, we are much more likely to interact with each other online and sort of miss out on those kismet opportunities, research bringing us together. So the offsite was something that we had already been doing, but it became really more important when we had less research in person. And there's many reasons to invest in an offsite. We do ours annually. And I've heard from others that that's kind of a pretty good rhythm. It is a big lift. Some of the questions that were submitted prior to the webinar was, how can you tell it's worth it? How do you make the time for this? It is a time commitment and it is an investment, so hence the kind of annual cadence for us. But there's many reasons, the first of which being deepening relationships across the team. I would say obviously in front of that, but that is really kind of the basis of this, is to make sure that you form and tighten bonds and relationships across your team. I also find it as being an excellent way of being able to problem solve together, especially on internal opportunity areas. If anyone else is on the call in a like professional services or client facing, stakeholder facing business, it's very hard to remember and carve out the time to work on yourself. So I think the offsite is a great way of tackling those internal things that, always get pushed onto the proactive list that will get done one day and then never do. So the offsite's a great time to set aside time for those types of things. We also collaborate on internal company initiatives. So by that, I mean research on research, or we have a pro bono project every year. And the offsite is a great time to talk about that, to really dedicate the time to those internal initiatives as well. And also, it just strengthens the team culture. People really look forward to it. And as we see when we'll start talking about timing, I have learned over the years how important it is to allocate the time for that to naturally build without, heavily programmed activities agendas, because you do need the space to be able to have that team strengthening ability. So I'm just going to give a couple examples of some of these that we have done towards those goals. What in terms of the interpersonal relationships, I would guess that most people on this call have some version of some personality aptitude characteristic test thing that you may talk about DISC, you may talk about other things on your team. We personally are an Enneagram team, so it is a system based on motivations. So you are kind of typed by your motivational draws. And we have actually had our Enneagram coach at our offsites twice. And I'm not selling that particular tool. I'm saying it's really great to include something that creates a group language. There's sort of words and terminologies and things that you can talk to when you're dealing kind of within a similar system. And it's really been helpful. We actually work with her even on the years that she doesn't come out. But it's great to have that framework and that shared language across the team. So that really helps with those relationships. In terms of problem solving, we usually include a hack day or half a hack day, depending on the size of the problem that we're hacking. And this is a term that my operations director, stole from the programming world. And this is basically if we have a problem to solve, like let's do it. Let's do a hackathon. Let's get in there. And one of the most recent chances that we did this, we were determined to have a podcast deliverable as one of our research deliverables to kind of get out of the slides, not always rely on the slides to tell the story. So we were like, how do we do this? And we'd been dithering around on best practices and we kind of cobbled some together, but we really carved out a whole day to determine what we wanted from that deliverable, how to construct it, what the parameters were, what kind of audio sound did we want to have as a company. And I'm not sure how that would have happened if we hadn't had a dedicated, no one leaves this room until we figure this out kind of opportunity. So that's kind of my best example of that component. I don't know about other leaders here, but I feel like I hear a lot of great ideas at conferences and events like like Small Giants, right? That I want to bring back to the team. So I've got books that are highlighted and tabs that are bookmarked and all of that stuff. Most recently at the Women's Presidents Association, we learned about the flywheel exercise and I got really excited about it. And so I bought everybody the little book and we worked on our own company flywheel at our offsite. So it kind of lets those, all those ideas that are like floating in your head. Oh, I wish I could spend some time with the team, or I wish I could bring the team into this thing I find really interesting for our business. It's a great chance to do things like that, to kind of to bring that to life and to be able to use those tools. The other thing I want to mention is strengthening team culture. Try new things together. We vote often on the types of extracurricular activities that we do. I was a little nervous when the team voted on what this thing called hydro biking was the last time we were at a lake house, and it ended up being very fun. Those are priceless pictures. Nobody fell off. It was a really good time, but I think stretching yourself with some of those activities, don't do, the kind of usual things that you might do. Stretch the team, have new experiences together, to have those shared memories. I think it's really important. So yeah, oh, great. Sorry. Thank you, Heidi, for popping in the personality and work styles. I think, yeah, any of those are good. And I think it's really about the grounding everybody in a shared language is all excellent choices. All right. And all of that really results in year-round collaboration, right? You have this one moment, but it's not about the moment. It's not about the day or the week. It is what that does for your year. And grounding everybody and setting aside the time to be together to work on these kind of more proactive internal things and get to know each other better. That to me is the main value, is that you really reap those benefits all year round. So how do you pull it off? is kind of the question. So what I'm going to say here is that there's many ways of doing this. I have learned a lot over the years. So this is more of like, tips from having made good decisions and bad decisions over the years. And this is what I really want to hear about from other people when we open the floor as well, to hear what other methods and tactics people use. So let's talk logistics. One of the questions that we got ahead of time was, how do you pick the place? I'm going to be very transparent. My choice each year is, what is the fewest number of flights? If we have 9 people, if we can get it down to like 6 flights, that's great. But we want to make sure that, there's somewhere easy to get to, that wherever your team is based, there are direct flights that are not breaking the bank, that the weather is good that time of year, right? We've actually moved ours into the fall and out of the summer because there were just too many places that we couldn't go because they were too hot if we tried to do it in August. So some very logistic, like how you would think about planning vacation. The other thing that I really think is helpful is having someone who is local or local-ish. Did they grow up there? Do they have friends? Do they go to college there? Do they live there currently? So you have some sort of local expert to pick the better restaurant or know what the traffic patterns are like or things like that. So I think that's sort of each year a different person on our team is tagged with not necessarily doing all the organization, but being kind of the local guide and expert. Timing is important. I think looking at your usual rhythm of your work calendar. That's why we tried to do it in the summer, because that was our low point. Busy wise is usually July, August. So, think about that. Think of your sales cycle, think of your project cycles. When can you fit this in? I think the earliest that you decide on the timing, the better, right? With advance notice, people can put it on their calendars. So we've learned over the years to set that earlier and earlier. So there's kind of, no excuses. We told you about it 11 months in advance. So that's important. And considerations of offering a hybrid option. I think it was mentioned in the introduction, I have an all-female team. We've got a lot of caregiving and childcare and maternity leaves and all of that stuff that goes with it. And so we have offered hybrid components over the years when people just, can't travel to be with us in person for whatever reason. I do think that you don't have to worry about making the whole thing hybrid. It's a very different experience being the 1 or 2 people that are not there, and they need breaks in a different way. And some of the activities, it's really hard to make a collaborative hybrid option for some activities. So don't worry about that. I would say don't worry that they can't maybe participate in absolutely everything. I think it's more about making sure that they can feel included and still, respect their time from afar. All right, so I'm going to admit, so I am a planner with a very chock full schedule. I have to remember that that only works for me. That does not work for everyone. And there is a lot of burnout from spending a lot of time, intense time together with people you work with, right? We all need breaks. We need a rhythm to the day that allows for downtime, that allows the chance to get another cup of coffee, take a walk, answer some emails, right? So really don't worry about making it this beautiful schedule where everything segues into each other. I think I've really learned over the years to create those breaks, create that downtime so that you don't, especially if you do a multi-day. So we're at the point now where we sort of do 2 to 3 days. You need those breaks. If you're doing one day, you can probably, just knock it out, but still be mindful of energy. And prevent content overload. Make sure some of your activities are not content heavy, because that can also get to a point where you just stop absorbing it, if there's too much or too many different topics, right? I also got a question ahead of time about who does this, who runs this. We share it. We designate different people to do different parts of it. um, because it creates ownership. It doesn't put all the load on one person. And so like on our last offsite, there were 4 of us that each had a section that we did. We were responsible for a couple hour block or a half a day situation. And that really helps. And it helps everybody get engaged and, be excited for their part in it. Yes, I already mentioned, I'll just mention that again, breaks, breaks, casual conversations, trust your team to be able to spend idle time together and have that be just as meaningful, I promise. All right, the other thing about topics is we have found having at least one external presenter who's not on the team has been really helpful. Going back to that kind of rhythm and flow, it's also nice for you as a leader to not have to be in charge of everything, right? If you book someone to do a day or a half a day as part of your offsite, that means you get to be a participant and they're in charge, and it's great. So I highly recommend picking at least one external topic or speaker or presenter to mix it up a little bit, so it's not all you talking amongst yourselves the whole time. And think about those topics that get overlooked. What are the things that you notice people push aside, don't get to a conclusion on, are hanging, right? Those things that are kind of hanging and you wish you had time to get to them. Those are really good topic ideas for your activities. And the other thing is collaborative, right? So when you think about the flywheel exercise that we did, there were flip charts, there were Post-it notes, there were small teams, there was a whole thing going on because it was collaborative, right? It was that idea of building something together rather than just listening and absorbing something, right? So the interactivity, the fact that what can you think about that gets people up and moving and working with each other and collaborating towards something rather than just receiving something is really key. And there are some side benefits. So couple tips, think what else you can use this time for. This is when we do our team photo. Very handy. You have everyone together. All you have to do is get a good camera or find a local photographer, update your headshots, use the time. Do you need we also capture some marketing collateral, right? People working, get a camera, shoot this, we'll use it in something later. So think about what other options you have when you have everybody together. We also now, this year for the first time, are tacking on a leadership day, either the beginning or the end, so that the leadership team has, has a separate time, has an additional moment, half day or a day. And, think about if that should be before, so you're prepped for the offsite, or if it's about digesting it afterwards. I think both could be really helpful and interesting. So yes, these are, again, a set of tips based on sometimes learning the hard way and sometimes having great ideas that I wanted to come with today, but I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts. We have left plenty of time for all of that. So please get in touch with me. I am going to be in Detroit for the summit as well. So happy to continue this conversation there. But yeah, let's free ourselves from the slides and have a chat.
Love it. Thank you so much. All right, we have a couple of questions that were submitted with your registration, so prior. But before I get into that, anyone want to share any kind of pressing questions, things that are top of mind for Katrina before we veer too far off in a different direction? Go for it, Steve.
There we go. Microphone problem. Sorry. Hi, Katrina.
Hi.
Question for you. You said bring in an exterior or external speaker, and I agree with that. Have you ever brought in somebody outside to moderate conversations so there's not kind of leadership bias to drive, particularly in brainstorming areas? But just curious if you've ever done that and how's that worked for you?
That's a great idea. We haven't, that has been separate from their topic, meaning we have had, a presenter then lead some group exercises in conjunction with the topic that they just presented, but not separately. And I actually think that's a great idea. That's probably like the cobbler's kids, with us, right? We all think we're facilitators and moderators because we do qualitative research. So, but I think that's a great idea to bring in an external person, especially if you have a team that, not everybody is comfortable with presenting or leading, or, that could create a lot of pressure. And so if you think of your team makeup, and if you don't have someone that sort of naturally does that, then take the pressure off. Yeah, bring someone else in to do it. I think that's a great idea.
Great question. Any other questions? Catherine, go for it.
So our team is a little bit bigger. We have 24, 25 people, and it's a lot of different personalities. And so we have some people who are really game for these sorts of retreats and don't shy away from an icebreaker or a brainstorming session or something like that. And then we have other people who think it's torture. And so do you have any recommendations for how to manage those different attitudes toward retreats?
Yeah, and I would love to know, like, from this group, if anyone has any tips on that as well. Yep. No, Priscilla, you go while I think. You talk
Yeah,
while I think.
oh, I would be happy to share my perspective. So I use Myers-Briggs a lot because it gives us that language of introvert and extrovert, not to pigeonhole people, but to understand where they get their energy. And so I always make sure that when we have activities like that, that we mix it up. And you said it beautifully earlier, Katrina, where you give people time and space, right, to step back and to relax. But that's also giving your introverts a chance. So if you build to process and to re-energize, where your extroverts, as you mentioned, Catherine, the ones that are in there, like, yeah, let's do this, let's have another meeting, they're the ones that are going to exhaust the other ones who don't want to be there. So you just balance it with a little bit of both so that there's not one group dominating the other, if that helps.
Yeah.
It made me think of intelligent sounding things as well. Thank you. No, I think part of it is if you part of what we do is tie it to our company values. So if you have a mission statement or values or something, like one of our values is connection. So when I talk about the offsite, it's connected to, I'm not telling you how you need to connect, right? Or how enthusiastic you need to be about it, but it is a tenet, right? I also think making some things optional helps. So with some of the activities that we do, the kind of more, fun on the side thing, we definitely make them optional. And if you need downtime and you need to, like, disengage for a minute, then that's totally fine. Nobody gets points for doing all the things. I think that's important too.
Yeah, those are good points. And I'll just add on another perspective from my own experience, and it obviously depends on the group, and what is actually happening. But I've also found success in not necessarily telling everybody what is on the agenda. They know there are pieces. Obviously, you have to prepare thoughts going into it, but sometimes those icebreakers or those pieces that make people feel anxious because they don't know what it is, they don't know what to expect, they will spend more time being worried about it and thinking of all of the things that are going to go wrong or the things they don't want it than if they just did it and they're actually going to enjoy it. So sometimes everyone just, like, being presented with the opportunity at the time of the opportunity is enough to kind of, everyone's in the same boat and it calms nerves a little bit. So, but obviously depends on the group. But that's a great question, the age-old question of engagement. And question from Michael in the chat, and Katrina, will start with you here, but then open up to the group and curious your thoughts. So Michael asked about the frequency of these retreats. And then based on if it's done annually, quarterly, what are maybe some of the differences that you have seen or experienced based on that cadence? So Katrina will kick it off, and then we'll
Yeah. And then I'm going to throw it out because we haven't tried anything for the full team other than annual. So I would love to hear from people who have done it more frequently. But what we do in between is we have sort of a pod system. So there are a lot of industry events in our world. And so we tend to have that as a really good excuse for smaller group connections throughout the year. I mean, yes, it's also a conference, right? So, like, please sell and speak. But but really, like, can you get 2 or 3 people together to go to one together as an additional sort of smaller group exercise throughout the year to keep that connectivity and kind of keep switching that up, who's in which pods, right? So that's something that we've done because we can't do it more than once a year. But has anyone done a quarterly or biannual?
I was going to say, actually, kind of relevant to Catherine's question and Michael's. I was working for a remote company where folks were in like 8, 9 states, and we all met quarterly. And it was like a set agenda that mostly repeated for 2 days every quarter. And one of the parts where instead of an icebreaker, and I linked it in our chat, it was a past virtual event for Small Giants, but we used a user manual assignment. And so everybody was asked to write their user manual. Sarah was there. She was shaking her head. And so your user manual could be anything. People did include like Myers-Briggs, like Priscilla mentioned, or the Enneagram. And then they also just described their working style. And it didn't have to be long and it didn't have to be well designed because not everybody was designers on the team. But it was a quick something that everybody had. It was shared all year long. And whenever there was someone new at that quarterly event, they were the one who presented. So there was always a couple people who were, 1 or 2 people who were sharing every quarter. And it just became part of our like quarterly planning. We were EOS operating, and it became part of our just general like how we project plan too when it was quarterly versus annually. Obviously, a bigger investment for total employee, resources and
Do you feel,
flights.
Heidi, that those are like there's times in a business cycle or in like the growth of a business when that's more important? Like the increased cadence?
It really worked for us because it was a fully remote company.
Mm.
And so we did have seasonal work. So we maybe moved the time of that quarter like up or down 2 or 3 weeks in that like month. But we also made it fit. Sometimes we made it so it matched with client meetings, or we made it match with like if we were trying to finish a project collaboratively, then we would tack on time, like you mentioned, like before, after time.
Gotcha. I don't know. Heidi has a tough one that I need some help answering. How you balance a retreat with a 7-day-a-week open business. That is a challenge. I think my instinct is to somehow do it like twice, right? With, allocate a couple times so that there's a core team that's still on if you need them to be on. But I don't know if anyone has any other idea. Yeah, Priscilla, is that an idea or just a hand?
Well,
It's just a
I
hand.
put it in the chat, but yeah, I've seen exactly what you said. I've seen that done. I've also seen you hire temps in to let everybody do it, but you don't really need everybody at every retreat unless you're just a really small team, and then you figure out how you can be all away. But the leadership team definitely needs to all be there for that kind of retreat. But if you're trying to just include everybody, there's got to be some rotation or hire temps.
Mm. Yeah.
Right.
Because finding the time, even if you find the perfect time, and even if you are a 5-day-a-week business, something comes up, right? Right. Something comes, oh, darn it. Like that's when we're supposed to be doing the thing. And I think you have to be a little flexible. Our clients are pretty familiar with this. They'll say, when is your retreat this year? We send them pictures afterwards. It's like, working to do better for you. Like, here's our, team dinner picture. So I think just not being afraid to say that you do it, right? For those business relationships and saying like, hey, we do this, this makes us be better for you. But yeah, the out of offices are on, but the computers are not closed is how we do it, right? If something needs to be answered, if somebody needs to step away and take something, also the reason to build in the breaks and the downtime to sneak in a call if you have to sneak in a call.
Great. Going off of that, Katrina, I'm curious, how do you set those expectations going in? So obviously you want people to be present in the retreat and the activities that are going on, but then balancing needs that are popping up. So it's not distracting to the rest of the group or that needs are still being met. How do you set those expectations kind of before you join together?
Well, I think there's two sets of expectations, right? So there's, for us in our business, there's a client set of expectations and there's a team member set of expectations. So we're project based. So this may be a little bit different if you're on a different system, right? But if I notice that projects are being sold and the timeline is built out near the retreat, we start putting it in the proposal, like FYI, we're closed on these days, right? So that when it lands and the schedules are built, it has been built around that, and they know, just like they would know, we're closed for Thanksgiving. Like it would be in the same kind of status there. So that helps. So we are kind of like putting it out there, FYI. From a team standpoint, I really make sure that everyone has a conversation with their manager the week or 2 weeks before, saying, this is coming, what's your plan? Like, what are your priorities? What are you going to do before? What are you going to leave afterwards? And what are the things that if it comes up, I need to say, okay, you can go take care of it. Like it's sort of outlining that so that everyone goes in and they feel like they have a plan of what they can set aside, what they need to rush and do, and what the, legitimate emergencies are. Because you have to, that has to be okay, right? You have to allow people to do good work and to care, right? I don't want them to not care. So yes.
Love that. So off of those lines, and Katrina, we'll start with you and then open it up to the group. There is the caring and there's like the fun of being together, all of the pieces, but doing all of this, as was brought up, it is an investment. How do you decide what is the right level of investment from a time as well as monetary commitment when you're planning and building a retreat? So we can talk about like the return on it, but if you're just planning as kind of like, we're going to do this, how do you make the decision for where that fits in and what is the right expenses of resources?
We found our budget by trial and error. So I didn't go in with a budget. We, after the first couple years, started itemizing everything and creating standards. And now we have like a per person, but so however many people are on the team that year, we times the amount, right? To get to what the total budget is for the offsite. I don't know if there is a magic formula for that, but it allows me to make decisions of, can we afford a photographer this year, or are our pictures good enough, right? What level of external presenter and how long of a workshop can we afford if we are, booking the lake house rather than, the less fancy accommodations, right? So it kind of gives you something to wiggle in. I based it initially also on, like I mentioned, we do a pro bono research project. So for a socially conscious or nonprofit company, I have a budget for that too. And so I said, you know what, the offsite needs to be kind of within that realm. Like it shouldn't be more than that. It should be level of investment that we spend on that work. So that I sort of pinned it to something that seemed equivalent for me. Do other people have other strategies about how to get to the magic number? Or maybe it's not, magic or something that hasn't worked. I don't know. Either way.
Yeah. And even if it's not a full retreat, curious if even if it's like a team dinner or something like that, like how do you kind of find like the balance of when is the right investment and how much you're willing to invest? Michael?
So for us, we run a fully virtual organization here, and what took me a little while to get my own arms around was that it's a lifestyle choice. It was a conscious decision to go that way, not a cost driver. So we kind of like, instead of paying rent, we're giving out allocations to the team to reinvest to make their home office nice and fund 1 or 2 team retreats. And that mentally like fits like the rent bucket. And it fills it up pretty quickly that way too, without going.
Yeah. That's another great way to look at it. I like the ways of like finding almost like these benchmarks of what feels like an appropriate.
I call it boss math, right? Like, what do I make it equivalent to?
Love it. Catherine, please.
One other thing we've done is use like the previous year's profit or like, surplus to fund or to help us determine like what level the retreat is going to operate at. Like, is it going to be really nice and like a very desirable location, or are we going to scale it back, or are we just going to do small team offsites? But the problem with that is that assumes that you have that surplus. And so what happens if you have a flat year or a down year? Then it comes back to just making the lifestyle choice, to use Michael's term. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
it's a
you
really
tell the team that? Do you communicate that? Okay.
No, no.
mm. This is
But we
really
don't do it. We don't do it every year because again, like with 25 people, our retreats are very, very expensive. And we're all travel snobs too. So, so we could not afford to do it every year. And so that's how we kind of, sometimes we'll say, oh, well, we've all been working so hard. We're just doing an extra nice retreat this year or something like that.
Well, that's also important to know your team and your people as well, because otherwise it's
Mhm.
going to become like a task that they're obligated to go and do versus something they're excited to fully be present with and enjoy. Love that. All right, as we wind down with our time, I'm sure there's many more things on our mind and would love to continue having you share some resources back with us. Be happy to share out more with the group as well as recordings. Katrina, one last question for you before we wind things down. How do you measure that this is something that you want to keep doing or that you will keep doing because you have done it over time? So, what are some of those, whether it's KPIs or just the gut intuitions, the things that you're tracking to know it is worthwhile to continue doing?
I think it's mostly the feedback from the team. Like I get thank you notes for doing this. We do a survey afterwards asking, what parts they liked, didn't like, want to do more, less of, things they want to do next year, and just the kind of the enthusiasm and the takeaways and how people reference things that we did throughout the year. We're doing our next steps on our flywheel now. We're doing kind of you test the steps and you realize which pieces of the flywheel need work. And so this year we've carved the year up into the times to allocate to the sections that need work. And I actually had a team member say, "Oh, I'm so glad this is coming back. That was such a great exercise. I'm glad we're going to get to dig into that more." I don't know how you measure that. I don't know what KPI that is, but that's really meaningful for me. So I think it is the feedback loop. It's listening to the team, and it's the feeling of it. I was very worried about extending it to 2 days. It was one day for a really long time because people away from their families and traveling and the cost and all of it. And the reason it is now 2 days and we travel on like the bookend days, we don't travel on either one of those days, is because of the feedback of, no, this is meaningful enough to me. It is okay. You can ask me to be away from home for more time because I get so much out of that. So that was something that I was worried about, that the team pushed me to consider, and it was a great choice, and it allowed for some of the cadence that I'm talking about. So hearing from your team that, based on the business I'm in, that's sort of no surprise that feedback is my metric, but definitely I think it's not to be overlooked.
Awesome. Such great ideas and wonderful questions. I think that's the most questions I ever remember getting in a virtual event. So what a fun hot topic. We so appreciate you, Katrina. Thanks everybody for being here and contributing in general. We hope to see you March 18th. That's our next virtual event, Community Connections, where we'll all business solve. And then, of course, a great way to schedule a team retreat is to head to our conference, the summit. It's April 29th to May 1st. So hopefully see you at one of those two things or both soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.